It is a brand new episode of Flyers Daily for the 22nd of August, 2025. Flyers Daily, presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. We're navigating through August, through, as the Canadians call it, cottage season. And I know he's been on vacation, but joining us on this episode from PHLY Philly, and great Flyers coverage provided there, the PHLY Flyers podcast. They do a great job, Charlie, Bill, and Kelly. And Charlie O'Connor joins us on this episode on the last day of his vacation. Sorry to disrupt your vacay, Charlie.
That is totally fine. Jason, you've been on our show multiple times, and we really appreciate that. So no way I was going to miss this.
I am a frequent viewer, I guess is what you call it now, or listener. Thanks for listening. First time, long time to your guys' show. You guys do a great job. I love the Flyers podcast community. You've been a part of it a long time, Charlie. I've often said that the Flyers podcast community was kind of built on the back of sports radio ignoring it. Here we are, National Radio Day, the sport and the team. But you were right on the cutting edge of it with Broad Street Hockey, and really kind of opened up a lane for a lot of great Flyer podcasts.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely proud that I wouldn't say we were the first podcast, but we maybe were the first that got a really big following. Obviously, myself and Kelly were longtime Broad Street Hockey affiliated, and then Steph Driver and Bill Matz came over from Sons of Penn. They had their own podcast at Sons of Penn. They came over to BSH, and we kind of merged the two shows together, and it worked out really well. And obviously that was a show for a really, really long time. And then when All City and All PHLY came to town, we kind of moved it over to the All PHLY umbrella, and it's been fun. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like every podcast in the Flyers ecosystem has their own niche. We certainly have our niche, but it's been really cool over the last couple of years to turn it into a daily show, because for the longest time at BSH, it was just weekly, and that was fun. But turning the podcast into what is functionally like the new version of an NBC Sports Philadelphia daily hockey show has been really neat, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, even in this summer where, there's no games, and I'm in the same boat as you, doing a daily. You have to come up with content and things to talk about that people are interested in, even though this offseason has felt like a very long one, because again, it's without the playoffs, but it's been an intriguing offseason, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's been the most fascinating about this offseason for the Flyers, and obviously it's been a while since they've done anything major. There's been little tidbits of news that have come out, but in terms of the bulk of Danny Briere's work, it ended quite a few weeks ago. But I think what's the most fascinating about their offseason, and I know we talked a little bit about this before we went on air, Danny, at the end of the season, his exit interview, he more or less laid out exactly what he was going to do. I didn't tell you exactly which players, but he was as open and honest in retrospect about what his plan was for the summer as I've ever heard a general manager be. And I've covered the Flyers at this point now for over 10 years, if you're counting years when I was part-time. I've never heard a general manager basically tell you what he was going to do and then do it all. And then you look back in retrospect, you go back and listen to his interview that he gave in April, and you're just like, he pretty much checked every single box he said he was going to check. And you might disagree with the specific moves or the specific picks that were made, but in terms of the needs that he stated he was going to address, he pretty much did everything. And it's interesting and it's impressive, honestly.
Yeah, because we've had so many GMs in all the sports over the years tell us what they're going to do to only not do what they said they were going to do, in particular with the Flyers and, rebuilds from Hextall to Fletcher. And it was kind of, the message was one thing, the action was another. And even if you go back, Charlie, a couple of years when Danny was named the interim GM, and then eventually they had that new era of Orange press conference introducing Valerie Camillo, introducing Dan Hilferty, Danny Briere, Keith Jones, and at the time, John Tortorella as the triumvirate. And he kind of laid it out at that time what this rebuild would look like. And ultimately, he said the players will decide when it's over. And really, they've kind of followed through on it. Do you think that is really why the fan base now seems to have a large amount of confidence in Danny? It's I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do without being specific to my detriment, and then actually doing it and keeping my word.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And look, a lot of it is too that they got Matvei Michkov. So there's a player that the fans can dream on. Now they have Porter Martone, another top prospect. So there are guys in the system, or even in Michkov's case on the team, that fans can point to and say, yes, he's going to be, the next star level player for the team. So that helps. But I do think a lot of it, and it's not just Danny. Danny's been a huge part of it, to be sure, but it's also Keith Jones and even Dan Hilferty, for that matter. They've done a good job of reestablishing trust between the organization and the fans. Now, it's not all there. It's not all going to get there until the Flyers are a consistent playoff team. There's going to be fans that just disagree with the way that they're doing it, or just won't trust them until the team is winning. But it's an entirely different way of communicating, I would say, compared to the way it was in the years leading up to, the Briere era, as we've called it on our show a few times. It just seems like they are placing more of an emphasis upon not lying to the fans. And I'm not saying that people I covered Chuck Fletcher for a long time. Really good guy. I enjoyed talking with him both on and off the record, but there would be times where it definitely felt like he was intentionally misleading the fans in terms of, maybe even what he believed, but couldn't say out loud. And now it seems like Danny is, you might disagree with him, but when he says what he's going to do and what he thinks, you can trust that that's actually what he's going to try to do and what he actually thinks. And I think that's gone a long way towards, towards rebuilding some trust between the organization and the fans, even while the team hasn't quite turned the corner on the ice in terms of results.
Yeah, I think Chuck Fletcher was trying to serve two masters. Try to serve two, you serve none. And I think that was a big part of it. And, for Danny to have this approval rating this offseason after being the fourth worst team in the NHL and a coaching change is pretty fascinating. Also, delivering Matvei Michkov a couple of years early didn't hurt, and he'll be going into year two. We'll get to him in a second. But when you look at kind of the job and the rebuild, Charlie, it's my contention that this is a really important year in this whole process, because I think the days of subtracting without replacing equal to or greater replacements are over. And you've got all this money next year with the dead money coming off the books. Fiscally, they'll be very healthy. But spending that money, you have to show some signs of growth, or the big name guys aren't going to be interested, because you're not going to look like a place where they can win. Having that growth this season, I think, is paramount, and it's a big task, I think, for Rick Tocchet in year one.
Yeah, and I think that was a big part of why they were so intrigued by Rick Tocchet, a guy who, we can discuss and debate the quality of his track record in the NHL, but one thing that they really like about him is that they feel like in multiple markets, he's gotten the most out of teams that aren't necessarily stacked with talent, particularly in Arizona. And I believe it was Danny who said that after the hiring. Basically, I think it was me who asked him, what was it about Rick Tocchet's track record that really jumped out at you? And he said, look, he may have won Coach of the Year in Vancouver, and he did a good job there, especially in the year when the team, dramatically exceeded expectations. But he points to his work with Coyotes, an organization that was a mess, that did not have a lot of talent, and he made that team competitive. And without saying as much, my read was, we think Tocchet can do the same thing for this team right now, where, look, we're planning to get more talent. We're planning to get better and be a more competitive team on paper in the next couple of years. But this year, we're not quite there. And we think that Tocchet is the kind of coach that maybe can have us, punching above our weight class for a year or two before, Michkov is fully what he's going to be, before Martones here, before the young guys are fully developed, before they can go out in free agency in the trade market and make the big moves. I think that was a big part of it. And I agree. I think this is a big year in terms of showing not just the fans, but the league and players that they can turn the corner and they can be a competitive team.
One thing, you let John Tortorella go, I think, with 12 games left in the season. You turn that page. Brad Shaw comes in for the interim. They hire Tocchet. People think what they think about Tortorella. There's not much in between. There's not much gray area when it comes to Torts. It's either you love him or you hate him. Everybody knows I'm very fond of him, both as a coach and as a man, with the support he showed me through my battle. But Tocchet, one of the things that's cited is he's a guy that will attract players. Players will look at it and go, that's a guy I'd like to play for. How much do you buy into that?
It's interesting because on one hand, you kind of just have to take it on faith because it's not like the other teams that he played for were, pulling the biggest free agency run. Now, granted, one of those teams was Arizona, and I don't know if anybody really wanted to play there from outside of the organization. So you do have to kind of take it on faith. But what I can tell you, and I'm sure you know this as well, you talk to a lot of people, in league circles with other teams, everyone who knows Rick Tocchet, everyone who knows him well, who is friends with him or even acquaintances with him, speaks extremely highly of not just him, the person, but just how brilliant of a hockey mind he is, about how
acumen, right?
how well knowledgeable he is about the game. And it seems like in league circles, his reputation is, look, he's not, he doesn't have like a Scotty Bowman reputation where it's like, oh man, I got to play for this guy who's one of the best coaches of all time. But it does seem like he has enormous amounts of respect in the game. And one thing that I've heard from a couple people about why he has that kind of respect, it's not just that he's smart and that he's a good talker. While he is both of those things, it's that not only is he an experienced coach, he was also not just an NHL player, but a really good NHL player. And that
and the way he played.
him, it gives it more credibility when he's talking to NHL players, because they look at him and they're like, a lot of former coaches played in the league, but not a lot of former coaches were as good as Rick Tocchet was and played the way Rick Tocchet played, had that toughness in combination with skill. And that just adds a little bit of credibility. It seems like players who, maybe didn't necessarily respect John Tortorella as much as they could have because, well, he really didn't play in the NHL. He wasn't like Rick Tocchet comes in and he can be like, I did it and this is how I did it. And I've talked to people who are like, that carries weight in the locker room. And maybe that would carry weight when you're pitching a free agent as well.
Yeah, I bled in that locker room next to my, my teammates for years. And I think that means more to today's athlete than maybe it did in the past, where it was oftentimes the coach wasn't a former player, where it was a Scotty Bowman or a Ken Hitchcock. Seeing a guy like Brindamore is another great example. Great player that players respect because of the way he played as well, as being part of that equation. But you do have your John Coopers, who I think the mind is just always so on point with him. Tocchet's probably the big name on the marquee for the offseason, but Trevor Zegras is also on that marquee. One of the things that Danny said that they were going to do is they were going to find players that needed a change of scenery that could bring more skill to the team. And Zegras checks every one of those boxes. I love the return, what you sent to get this player that has had a ton of sizzle, hasn't had a lot of stake yet in his NHL career. But this is an opportunity. An East Coast kid coming back to the East Coast. Maybe it got a little too big for him too quick, being on the cover of the game and everything else. But this is a great reset for his career, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And look, I'm not saying that I know how this is going to play out. There's a world where, him and Tocchet don't quite work the same way that Tocchet and Elias Pettersson clashed at times. Like, there's worlds where this doesn't work, or maybe he gets injured because he has dealt with injuries. But everything I've heard from the people I talk to, around Trevor Zegras over the last few months is just how excited he is for this opportunity, and how the consistent theme, the running theme I've heard from people I've talked to is like, he's not going to waste this opportunity. He knows this is an opportunity for him to reestablish himself as one of the most exciting young players in the league and do it the right way. And that basically, like, he's not going to blow it. He is so pumped to show everyone that he can be that guy. Now, obviously, having the desire isn't the only thing. You still got to do it, and you got to have some luck. You got to stay healthy and whatnot. But I'm optimistic about the ability of Trevor Zegras, whether it's at center, and I know the Flyers are hoping he can stick down the middle, or even if he has to kick back over to wing. Like, I'm optimistic that he's going to score, that he's going to have a good chemistry with Matvei Michkov, especially on the power play, maybe at even strength if they play a lot together and that works. But I'm optimistic that he can turn it around. I really am. And part of that is driven by the fact that, from everything I've heard, he really is coming at this from the right mentality. This isn't like, oh, okay, I finally got out of Anaheim. Now I can just roll in here and be back to being awesome. It seems like he's taking this very seriously, and he knows that this is an opportunity for him to kind of rejuvenate his career.
No question. I talked to Bush the other day, and one of the things when Bush and I were talking about Trevor Zegras that he cited was not only did he have a couple of really good seasons before, by age 22, a couple 60-plus point seasons, but in the 2021 World Juniors, in 7 games, he had 18 points. 7 goals and 11 assists, and was great on that stage. So I'm really looking forward to watching him. Whether he sticks down the middle, we shall see. So let's stay in the middle real quick, because if he's in the middle, Couturier's in the middle. You have Dvorak, who I think you can move to the wing, use his face-off ability, and still play him at the wing. But Jett Luchanko is kind of sitting there in a really weird position where if the CBA was kicking in this year, it would have really benefited him maybe. But that's not the case. It's either juniors or the Flyers for Jett Luchanko. What makes more sense? To me, I'd rather play him 11 to 13 minutes in the NHL on a third, fourth line kill penalties than go back to Guelph and have another year there.
Yeah, I think it's really going to just depend on how he performs in training camp. But based on the conversations I've had, I get the sense that the Flyers would like him to make this team. Now, they're not going to force him on the team. You know, if he has another camp where, yeah, he looks really physically fit and he's showing his speed, but the offense isn't there, I think they'd probably send him back, because I don't think they view it as a bad thing if he goes back for another year. It's not going to kill his development. He'd get to play in World Juniors again, probably in a much bigger role than he was last time around. So I don't think they think it's necessary for him to be on the team, but I do think they're rooting for him to make it. And I agree with you. I wondered a few weeks ago if it was going to be one of those situations where, well, he's got to play high up in the lineup, and if he's not playing high up in the lineup, we're going to send him back. I'm getting the sense that they're fine. If, like, obviously he can't be getting 4, 5, 6 minutes a night. That doesn't help anybody. But I don't think they would be scared of using him in, and I'll use this comparison, in kind of like the role that Sean Couturier was used in his first season when he made the team right after being drafted, where he was like a 3-4C type who got penalty kill time. Because while Couturier is obviously much bigger than Luchanko, there are some similarities in the sense that they're both probably physically capable of handling the NHL, and they're both extremely high hockey IQ players. Yeah. I think if he has a good camp, I don't even think he has to have an incredible camp, but I think if he has a good camp, if he shows some offense and does everything he did last camp, I think at the very least they'll keep him around for the first 9 games, and then they'll see where things go. But I get the sense the Flyers want him on this team, and they'll, whether it's moving Noah Cates over to wing, whether it's moving Dvorak over to wing, they'll figure it out, because hey, he made the team last year. And if he made the team last year and he's a year older, a year stronger, a year smarter, I think it's a very reasonable possibility that he makes his team out of camp.
And plus, he's the type of player that, gets a taste, sees what it feels like to play in the NHL, and prepares for it. He is so cerebral. And while he doesn't have the size Couturier had out of his draft, he's probably a stronger physical specimen than Couturier was. Couturier was a bit of a beam, still is kind of a beanpole, although albeit strong. One of the guys that, we were kind of looking at when it comes to training camp coming up in just a few weeks was Tyson Forster. And we had the injury, the infection coming out of the World Hockey Championship. And it looks like he is good to go. They're optimistic. Really important, I think, Charlie, for him to follow up last season where he ends up getting 25. Yeah, he got some of it at the end of the year when the games didn't mean anything anymore. But one thing he hasn't done is gotten off to good starts. Yeah. A good start for Tyson Forster could lead him to 32 plus goals this year, and some power play help.
That's for everybody. I feel like up front on this team, if the power play gets better, everybody's numbers are going to look better. But that was why I was so bummed when I heard the news about the injury, because you're just like, if he just were to get off to a good start, because even in his first year when he made the team out of camp, I remember interviewing John Tortorella repeatedly, and he's like, he's doing everything right. He's just not scoring. And then the scoring sort of popped up around the middle of the year. And then last year you're thinking, well, man, if he just starts out strong and does all the little things right and scores a little bit, he could rack up a ton of goals. And then the little things kind of slipped a little bit at the start of the year, and he wasn't scoring. I was going into this year thinking, yeah, this is going to be the year. He gets off to the good start, builds off at the end of last season. And then you have the injury pops up. You have the concerns about the infection. Fingers crossed he can start the season, and fingers crossed also that if he starts the season, it's not something where, 6 months down the road, we're looking back and we're saying like, yeah, he was in the lineup for game 1, but he didn't look like Tyson Forster until game 20 because he didn't really have the full offseason that he needed. So I'm more optimistic now than I was a month ago, because it seems like things are progressing in the right direction, but I'm still a little concerned about a slow start, just because it's not like he's had a normal summer. And that's a bit of a worry to me, that I still think at some point the breakout's going to happen. I'm just a little worried that maybe it's not going to be this year because, again, it's a weird summer going into a start of the year where he hasn't shown that he can have good starts. So this might put him behind the proverbial 8 ball a little bit even more.
Yeah, it definitely tweaks your preparation for a season when you're recovering from an injury. We saw that with Claude Giroux when he had the double core and he had to break down the scar tissue. Getting off to a good start will be incumbent upon Owen Tippett as well. Otherwise, he'll be a player that's got a lot of fan noise around him, Charlie. He's got a big contract. Forster signs that contract. We'll get to York in a second, but Tippett's on this 8-year deal, over $6 million a year. Hasn't gotten to 30 goals in his career yet. This has got to be the year and a good start. He can ride the wave, but if he gets off to a tough start, the noise is going to get pretty loud around him.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see where Owen Tippett goes this year because it really could go in either direction. He could be great. He could bounce back and score a ton of goals and get off to a hot start and become a trusted guy under Rick Tocchet. Or, Rick Tockett's a guy who he's been open like, no, I'm not. We're not only going to play dump and chase, but we are going to focus more on being a better possession team. Owen Tippett is more, at least at this stage of his career, more exclusively a rush guy. So he's going to have to adjust. Now, I think he can. He's got the size. He's got the strength. He can go to the net. I've seen him do it. I've seen him play well in the cycle, but he hasn't done it enough. So he's going to have to make changes in order to thrive under Rick Tocchet. And if he does, he's going to be a much better all-around player for it. And then we're going to say 2 years down the line, thank God he played under Rick Tocchet because Rick Tocchet was able to unearth him and unearth the player he could be. By the same token, there's a world where it's March and he's sitting on 18 goals. And then we're like, oh God, are they going to have to look to move him elsewhere because he just doesn't fit under this coach in the style that he wants this team to play. So to me, this is very much not a make or break year because he's got the contract. I think the organization likes him not only as a player, but also as a person. But there are times where guys just prove not to be a good fit. So I think this is a huge year for Owen Tippett. I hope that he can turn it around. Not that last year was awful, but it was a disappointment, I would say, especially in terms of raw numbers. We know he has the talent to be better. Yeah, I think this is a huge year for Owen Tippett, and he's probably the guy who, for me, it's like 50-50. It could truly go either way.
With him, I know you break down a lot of tape. I like the CSI goals for, goals against. I don't want to just see the end of it. I want to see why the goal was scored or wasn't scored. I'd like to see him involved, Charlie, in more collaborative offense. He seems to create a lot of his offense on his own with just his freak ability to skate at that size and fly. I'd like to see more collaborative offense in addition to the, generating offense as a one-man player sometimes, specifically off the rush. In your kind of analysis and looking at him on film and kind of dissecting it, what does he need to do to be a better player kind of collectively on a unit to get the production that way as well?
It's a good question. And I will say that one of the things that, there wasn't a lot in his game last season that I loved, but I did think there were stretches, maybe 2-3 week stretches where he did look like he was making strides as a passer. Like he made some legitimately good passes, better passes than I've seen him make pretty much his entire NHL career, at least since he's joined the Flyers. And you're thinking like, man, if he could just do that more, because it's in there. It's clearly in there. It's not like he can't do it. He just doesn't do it enough. So you're hoping that maybe that was the start of something. Like if you look at his numbers, really, the big thing that dropped last year for him was a shot volume. He just didn't shoot nearly as much as he did the year before. And some of that was the power play. He wasn't in as much of a shooting role, but it extended to 5-on-5 as well. So maybe if he's starting to take some strides already in the passing side, and then he works on that a little bit more this year, while also maybe getting unlocked a bit more on the power play as a shooter, maybe you can bring it all together and he can be a more effective all-around player. But I would say it's more consistency than anything else. That end, I will say, I would like to see him go to the net more because while taking the puck to the net, sure, that's an individual play. You're carrying the puck. You can also go to the net and that creates more space for your teammates on the perimeter. That gives them an opportunity to have, a harmless shot get knocked in on a rebound by Tippett because he's big and he's hard to move in front there. So that might be one way for him to be a little bit more collaborative if he does a little bit more net focused off puck than he has been, rather than being more rush focused, which is the kind of player he's been. So maybe that, but I do think the passing ability is there. It's just like, you need to show it more. You need to, it needs to stop being flashes, and it needs to be like part and parcel of your game.
Yeah. The Flyers' best net front guy last season was Couturier.
Yeah.
And you'd like to see somebody with that frame like Tippett has go there more. I'd like to see him spend some time with either JVR or Joe Pavelski, work on tipping pucks too.
Yeah.
Like, those two guys were two of the best that I've ever seen at tipping pucks.
Oh, I mean, as a writer, like, I have been waiting since they acquired him to be able to make the Owen Tippett tips it pun in an article. And I don't think I'd be able to do it once.
That's a great point. He's obviously important this year. Cam York, who, last year with the injuries and a bit of an uneven season by the eye test, really threw out, never really got his legs under him to the degree maybe he did the year prior. But he gets, obviously what happened with Torts at the end and sitting on the bench for that entire game, not taking a shift, but he signed shift. I said, he signs the contract. Boy, Charlie, if he can get back to being that player 2 years ago and on that development arc and taking steps forward, and maybe a power play guy under this new head coach and this new coaching staff, that number at 5.1 looks like one hell of a bargain for a guy that can really play a lot of minutes by, really being discerning with his energy.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where all the tools are there. I don't think he's an elite skater, but he's definitely a plus skater. He's an above average skater.
Balance, right?
Yeah, he's got puck skills. He's better defensively, I think, than he gets credit for. I just don't necessarily see. I don't see the assertiveness from him that I want to see from a guy with his tools. And I think even he would acknowledge that he can be more assertive. He can take charge of games. I think the thing that's the most frustrating to me about what we saw from Cam York last season was how well he started the year. Yeah. And you saw it for up until that injury. If you remember, Travis Sanheim got the hype, at the end of the first half because, he's the surprise entry onto Team Canada. He got going really after the York injury happened. But if you remember, before the York injury, Sanheim wasn't playing all that well, even by his own admission. And York was the guy who, when he goes down, and it's funny to think about because of how the tenure of John Tortorella ended. But I remember when York, they announced the injury. And we go into it was into the press conference area in the Wells Fargo Center before a game, and we interviewed Torts about it. He's like, knowing where I was with Cam York a year ago, it's wild how much it's hurting me that we're going to lose him because he's become such a good defenseman. And it really did. At the start of the year, it looked like he was starting to put it all together. And then when he came back from that injury, he just never could recapture where he was those first few weeks of last season. If he can get back to that point where it looked like he was even taking a step beyond where he was the previous year, that's an exciting player. It's just I don't know where it went. I'm sure some of it was the injury, but then it just seemed like he never could fully get back into that same headspace. And I hope that what he's done this summer has allowed him to get back in that headspace.
I totally agree with you. It was a shoulder, which is always tough for defensemen with, getting crashed into, on forechecks and dumps and stuff like that. But I would love to see him be more assertive in leading rushes. Those we saw him do it at other levels at Michigan and on the Team USA. Those tools are in his bag. He just needs to do it. So does Jamie Drysdale. Needs to stay healthy. Important year for Drysdale as well. He's always going to have the looming Cutter Gauthier who got the better end of the deal. For a night last year, it was Jamie's better at Wells Fargo Center, one of the great atmospheres of kind of a miserable season. But Drysdale is another really important piece to focus on right out of the gate. Again, good start is paramount.
Yeah, I think Drysdale kind of falls in that same bucket with Tippett for me, where it truly could go either way. And I think the big concern I have for Drysdale this year, and again, it's not a killer thing. It's not like he's destined to disappoint because of this, but he had a really strong relationship with Brad Shaw. And Shaw was really doing a good job, slowly but steadily developing him and developing his all-around game. I did an article in March. Actually, it was after it got released, after Shaw got named the interim coach. But I interviewed Shaw before, and I interviewed both him and Drysdale. We broke down plays, good plays and not so good plays from Drysdale. And actually, it was, now that I think about it, it was all good plays. It was all positive. But knowing, talking to both of them and hearing Drysdale echoing Shaw without even knowing that that's what Shaw said. It was abundantly clear that like they had a great player coach relation. Now, everything I've heard about Todd Reardon is that he's a really good teacher as well, that's the reason why they brought him in to be defensive coach. But you just wonder, like, is it going to take time for them to get on the same wavelength? And given how important of a season this is for Drysdale, like, I just worry, like, can he afford to have a 3/4 of a season of getting used to a new coach? Like, this is such an important year. Now, maybe it clicks right away. Maybe by camp, they're on the same page, and then he could just build right where he left off last year and be off to the races and scores 45 points and drives play at even strength, and he's getting top 4 minutes by November. But I do worry a little bit if the loss of Bradshaw as defensive coach, if that could hurt him maybe even more than a guy like York or anybody else on the blue line.
Yeah, it would be his third adaptation period in about 3.5 years, which these guys have all played different systems, but they're very detailed particulars. As Bradshaw, he was great with the particulars and the details. I mean, just unbelievable. Let me ask you about training camp and guys that can push. We mentioned Luchanko, but obviously a guy, Alex Bump, it is, had an amazing year last year, going to the Frozen Four, winning the national championship, coming and getting a taste. I love what he said when he was here in Philadelphia at development camp on why he chose to play with the Phantoms and not, make his NHL debut. I thought he had more to gain by playing with the Phantoms and in those playoffs. He's obviously going to push for a spot. Talk is wide-eyed about it. So is the organization. What do you expect to see out of Bump? Does he make the team? Is there a spot for him to make the team?
I think there's a spot. Now, that said, if Forster can go to start, and maybe not to start camp, but to start the season, that does fill up one of them. But I do think there's a spot there. He could make this team. I can tell you mentioned about that comment that he made about, choosing to start in the AHL rather than maybe get the 1 or 2 games in the NHL. I can tell you the organization ate that up. They loved it.
Oh,
they loved
I
that
ate it
decision.
up.
They loved it. They were like, why don't more players want to do this? We would love it if players were more focused on, what's best for their development rather than getting the NHL game as quickly as possible. They love Alex Bump. And I think where I'm at with Bump in terms of his chances of making the team, and I've had this debate with my co-host Bill on PHLY Flyers, it's not that I think that he's been guaranteed a spot. I don't think this is a case of like where it was with Tyson Forrester a couple years ago, where Torts fell in love with him when he had that audition with the Flyers the previous year. And like, as long as he didn't flop, he was making the team. I don't think it's that with Bump. I think he has to have a really good camp. I just think he's going to have a really good camp. Like, I think he's a really good prospect who was the best player on the ice most days at development camp. I think he is going to play well enough in camp and in preseason to make this team. Now, if he doesn't, he won't. But I think he will, and that's why I'm confident. So it's not like I'm predicting him to make the team because I think they've penciled him in. It's just that I think he's going to have a really good camp, and I think he's going to earn it.
Yeah, the thing with him too is, I mean, he's really matured as a pro, coming into the pro game. Body is matured too. I mean, he has put on a lot of muscle over the last couple of years. And I agree. I don't think anything's been given. Nothing will be given to him. And look, if he doesn't make the team out of camp, I know some people will have our fatalists that'll freak out that he was all hype. It's not necessarily. It's not the end of the world. No. There's a lot of guys that have to go to the AHL to adjust to the pro game a little bit too. I do think he will end up making the team as well. And I'm interested to see him play. Charlie, so much stems on goaltending. We've talked about it ad nauseum in this city for decades. They go out and they get Dan Vladar. It's going to probably mean that Ivan Fedotov is going to go on waivers, presumably clear, and be headed to the Phantoms. But the tandem of Ersson and Dan Vladar, we'll see how it goes. I think they'll push each other, and I really like what Vladar had to say about earning the crease. There wasn't a lot of entitlement there from Dan Vladar, kind of like we kind of perceived coming from Alexei Kolosov.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Vladar, number one, he wanted to come here. Like, he looked at the situation and said, I want to come here. I think I can earn the number one job. And that's not a slight against Sam Ersson, but I want a goalie to believe that he can be the number one somewhere. I want him to have that confidence in himself. Like, he could have very easily just been like, because Calgary wanted him back. He could have very easily said, you know what? I'm happy here. I don't really feel like moving. I can be a quality number two to Dustin Wolf for the next 4 or 5 years and be happy with that. And some guys are fine with that. this guy wants to show that he can be, if not a true number one, at least a 1A, at least be the leader of a tandem. And what I can tell you about Vladar is this. If you look at his numbers, they're not amazing. He's had 4 seasons where he's had 2 seasons where he was basically a league average goalie, and then 2 seasons where he was below league average. But I can tell you that when you talk to people who know the position, when you talk to people in the game, they speak very highly of his plausible upside. Dan Vladar is a well-respected goalie in terms of like what he could plausibly become. And as someone like you know goalies and you talk to goalie experts, well, I'm sure you're hearing a lot of the same things where, they think that there's something there with this guy. Kim Dillaball apparently thought there was something there with this guy. Ersson, I still like him. I do. I just don't think he can be a 50, 55 a start a year guy. But if you put him in a tandem where he's not having to play, 3-4 times a week, even sometimes, I think he can be a quality goalie. I just hope that Vladar can spell him enough that he is a success in Philadelphia, at least at the point where he's delivering, average results, that they can use Ersson in that way. And then we can find out if Ersson can be good in that role like he was that first half of that year before the Carter Hart situation.
Yeah, that's the thing that I look back on as well. I don't know that Sam's ever going to be a 57 game starter either. I think he's maybe more suited to be a 46, 46-38 split, or maybe it's the other way for Vladar, and who's never played over 30 games in the league. One of the things that'll be interesting is I think there's something happening for goalies right now too, Charlie. And as an analytics guy, maybe you can speak to this. But we saw it last year. We know Vasilevsky went on the record about it. Other goalies did with Kevin Woodley from In Goal Magazine and NHL.com about the lack of shots that are coming to goalies these days. I think we're going to see the league average save percentage be about .895 this year, because I watched those playoffs and I remember third period of Cup final games, seeing the shot totals at 14-11 and 16-9. Teams being very selective about what they put to the net. Before it was get everything to the net, clear-sighted. Those were great for goalies. A, they brought up save percentage. B, they made them feel the game. And C, it gave them confidence. Now the discretionary manner in which the puck actually gets to the goalie, it can be an issue for some guys mentally. How much do you think that's going to impact? And do you see it becoming even more pronounced this year? It's all about high danger, quality over quantity.
Yeah, that's definitely the league-wide shift, to be sure.
I would hate it, by the way, as a goalie.
Yeah. I bet. But yeah, that's the league-wide shift. Teams are more focused on high-danger chances, less focused on shots from the outside. One thing, though, I will say about the Flyers goalies this year is that while I do agree that is the league-wide trend, and they are going to be facing high-danger chances, league average save percentage, I think, is going to be, as you said, maybe even lower than it was last year, and it was pretty low last year. I do think that maybe the Flyers will be a little insulated by that because you no longer have John Tortorella screaming at you to block every single shot. Yeah. So maybe the goalies will see a few more shots per game from distance because they're not all getting blocked. Because that was one thing that probably did hurt the goalie save percentages last year in Philadelphia, was that they weren't getting their save percentages boosted by, 4 or 5 distance shots a game because they were all getting eaten up by the defenseman. Now, you're not going to be able to tell Nick Seeler to stop blocking shots. He's going to block shots. That's his whole game. But they might see a few more shots a game that are easily stoppable. And, whether that helps them as goalies or not, I guess that depends on the goalie. But it may help their save percentages because, look, it's not like Rick Tocchet is anti-blocking shots, but I don't think he's as dogmatic about it as Torts is. Yeah. So you might see a few more shots getting on goalies that are easy-ish saves that maybe can boost their save percentages a bit more so than other teams around the league that weren't quite as dogmatic about blocking shots as John Tortorella was.
I've talked to Sam Ersson about this, and I've had these conversations when I was playing. I would tell my guys, if a shot's coming from the point, don't even get in the way. All you can do is screw me up. That's all you can do. You can tip it and change the direction, and now I'm fighting it. Give me a shot from there all day. I'm wearing this big equipment for a reason. Let me just eat those ones up because that's my job. The thing is, too, in the system that Torch ran with, that demand on blocking shots, it also broke down the structure. Yeah, because guys were selling out a little too much to do it, and it created a lot of opportunities with cross ice passes going across the middle of the ice in the slot line, and the Flyers had a horrible environment for the goaltenders as a result. Tocchet, with that box and one system, really likes to play on one side of the ice, and that will help the goalies as well, not having to travel as much.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see if Tocchet's effect on the system is going to, and I'm not expecting, they're the goalies to be the best in the league by any means, but they were by far the worst in the league by save percentage last season. And I am expecting Rick Tocchet to prioritize that because I think he knows that, look, like even if you're keeping shot totals down, you're not going to win playoff series if you've got a team-wide save percentage in the 880s. Like, you're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You have to make life a little bit easier for your goalies, and not absolving the goalies, but I think Tocchet is going to make it a priority to try to make lives a bit easier for his netminders, and hopefully they benefit from it.
Yeah, the step forward path this year is to give up less goals and get some power play.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about 5-on-5. They were good. They scored 5-on-5.
Yeah.
It's going to be supplementing it with power play and keeping more pucks out of the net. Well, Charlie, we're only 3 weeks away to the rookie game, if you can believe that.
Wow.
We'll be headed up to the PPL Center. It's not Michkov Mania this year. So last thing for you, Porter Martone won't be there as well because he's attending Michigan State University. I cannot believe he didn't go to Penn State, first of all, as an alum.
I love it. As a noted Penn State hater, I love that he didn't go to Penn State.
Well, maybe there was no NIL money left because McKenna got it all, but he's headed to Michigan State. I think this is the prudent decision for him. What did you think of the decision for Martone?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was the right move. I wouldn't have had a problem if he would have gone the other way. The problem is that, and this is everything that I've heard from people in the organization. And I mean, I don't really have an in with Martone's camp at this point, but hopefully at some point I will, get to know him better as a person and whatnot. But I think the general consensus from everyone in that situation was the one thing no one wants is for him to go back to juniors. Like, if
no
he would have
upside.
exactly, like if he would have went to camp and made the team, and even if he wouldn't have put up great numbers, I think that could have been good for his development. If he scored 25 points in his rookie year, but learned the ropes on the fly, that could have been good for him. And going to college, I think, can also be good for him because he'll be forced to play at a higher pace than he played at in college. He'll be forced to play against stronger players, so he can't just fully lean on the fact that he's just bigger and stronger than most of the kids that are out there. So that'll help him. The one thing that wasn't going to help him was going back to juniors. And that was a risk because had he went at development camp and been the best player on the ice and you've been like, oh man, this dude's going to walk to a roster spot, that would have been one thing. But he didn't. He was good. He wasn't stunningly good. Not to the point where you're like, man, if this guy shows up, he's making the team. He was going to have to perform better at rookie camp and training camp than he did at development camp. And while I think he was theoretically capable of doing that, because I think he's a really good prospect, it wasn't a guarantee. And you were risking the possibility of having to send him back to a level that he was already better than, and it was already not going to be a good environment for him to develop things he needs to develop. So I think the best way to put it, I think, is that this was the safer play. Yeah. That the NHL would have been great, but the juniors game would not have been great. And now we have a certain path for him to be in a good developmental spot for him. So it was the safer decision, I think, overall.
And he can still end up making his NHL debut next season when the Michigan State season ends. So we'll see how that plays out and how far they get. I said that was the last one. I lied. I have one more because I want to get your thoughts on Matvei Michkov year 2.
Okay.
I see a lot of expectations out there. And granted, this is on social media, so it is what it is. But a point per game player. He's going to get 100 this year. And I'm cautioning people because I go back, I look at a guy like Nikita Kucherov in his 21-year-old season in 82 games. He had 65 points. In his 22-year-old season, he had 66. The next year at 23 is when he really popped and became a point per game player. Oh, yeah, he's got 128, 144, 121, 113 mixed in there since then. But it's not that easy to just become that player in the NHL. It wasn't easy for Kucherov, who in my eyes is a top 5 player, and it won't be as easy for Matvei Michkov either to do that. I think people need to maybe temper that expectation a little bit heading into year 2.
Yeah, look, I'm all for people tempering expectations because that means that, if he doesn't blow the doors off, people won't be livid. Like, I'd rather not have to deal with angry fans who start turning on Matvei Michkov because he's not yet a point per game player, in just being a teenager recently. So I would love people to temper their expectations. That said, like, I could see a world where he takes a big leap because I do think he's going to get more ice time. I'm hoping the power plays better. And, if he's getting a couple more minutes a night, if he's If he's on a power play that isn't one of the league's worst and it's more of a league average power play, like I could see him cracking 30 goals and getting over 70 points. But I don't think that should be the expectation. I think there's an element where it's like, yes, I think it's plausible. And I think it's reasonable to be excited about the possibility of him taking a leap, because I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility by any means. But I also don't want people to go in with like, if he's not point per game, that's a disappointment, because the NHL is a hard league and he's going to be getting used to a new coaching staff. So I don't want people to keep their expectations so high that anything less than a full-fledged star turn is cause for concern. But I do think a full-fledged star turn this season is a possibility. And I don't want people not to be excited about that being an option, because I do think it could happen.
And the league's going to be keyed on him too. They got a year of him on tape as well. So he's going to have to adjust. You got to add more tricks to your bag as well. Charlie, where can everybody get your great content, both on demand with the podcast, the YouTube show, and obviously Twitter and all your written content as well?
Absolutely. So all my written content is on allphly.com. To read the vast majority of it, you have to be a diehard member, which gives you access to all of our writers, not just Flyers writers. That's Jason.
Diehard. I'm a paid diehard.
He's a diehard.
You got my money.
But the good thing about it is you don't just get, my articles, Alex Appleyard's articles, Matty Campbell's articles in the Flyers. You also get, our great Eagles coverage with EJ Smith and Bo Wolf. You get our Sixers coverage with Kyle Neubeck and Derek Bodner. You get our Phillies coverage as well. So it's kind of like
read Jamie Lynch again.
I think he only did that one article, right? I wouldn't say Jamie
so.
is known to be a writer, but he might sprinkle him in from time to time. But you can read all my articles there, all of our Flyers articles as well. And then we have the daily podcast. We have a YouTube channel, PHLY, and then it's on all your podcast platforms, the PHLY Flyers podcast daily show. By the time this runs, I will be back from vacation, back on the show. So I've missed about a week and a half due to taking some much needed personal vacation time. But I'll be back on the show by the time this airs, and you can find that on Spotify, Apple Music, all your podcasting platforms.
Great stuff. And I love the show that you guys do. I'm a consumer. I read everything. I listen to it all. And I appreciate the work that you, Bill, Kelly, and everybody does over there as well.
We appreciate the work you do on Flyers Daily. It's also a great show.
Keep up the great work, man. I love it. I can't get enough hockey talk and hockey content, and you guys are providing good quality content. So, Charlie, thanks for doing this. Enjoy the rest of the summer. We'll see you in 3 weeks in Lehigh at the PPL Center for Flyers Rangers Rookie Series. Really appreciate you doing this, and be well.
Yeah, absolutely. You too, Jason.
All right, there he is. That is Charlie O'Connor from PHLY Sports. Does a great job covering the Flyers, and I love the Flyers podcast community. It was born out of a need for Flyer fans and hockey fans in the Philadelphia market to be served, and many have stepped up. And as Charlie stated as well, it's interesting because the Flyers podcast community, there's very little redundancy in the podcast. Yeah, we're talking about the Flyers. Yeah, we're talking about hockey. A lot of us, the same subject matter, but we're all coming at it from different angles. And we do the shows differently. Flyers Daily, different from PHLY. PHLY, different from all the other podcasts that are out there, and some great Flyer podcasts that are out there. So we appreciate Charlie taking the time at the very end of his vacation to join us here on Flyers Daily. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Just 3 weeks from tonight, we'll be at the PPL Center in Allentown for Flyers Rangers rookie game. And coming up Monday, it'll be another Mondays with Meltzer, and some great stuff on the way for the final week of August next week as well. So everybody have a great, safe weekend. We'll talk to you next week, Monday with Meltzer, on a brand new Flyers Daily.